Hi guys, so as you can recognize on my screen right now, it is pretty much chaotic, and the reason it's looking like this is because I work as a systems administrator, and for many of you who are familiar with the role of a system administrator, it can be quite chaotic, quite demanding at times. But one of the things I recognize is that in order for you to be as efficient as best as possible in executing your duties in an efficient manner, right? As we all know that as system admins, you are responsible for all the systems that the organization or the business rely on to carry out its productivity, right? And your environment can be solely on-premise. It can be an hybrid, which is a mix of both on-premise and cloud solutions, right? So it can be very demanding. I mean, just as, for example, just entering the premises of your organization, right? You are being called on by employees with various concerns, various needs, right? So one of the things that I've recognized over the years as a system admin that I'll be using, that I'll be sharing with you, and I hope you find it's pretty useful if you have not started approaching your job from this perspective, right? And it is having a list, having a checklist, having a guideline, and especially for those who are new within our organization, right? And you really want to be on top of your game. It's always good to have that guideline, have that checklist of your important tasks, right? And I know that many of you will say that you have your plans and you get in and then you're bombarded. But what I'm referring to, for example, let's say, if you notice on my screen, I have a number of things there. I'm just quickly going to jump to my cloud environment, right, which is Azure, right? And I work as a cloud administrator already, right? I work with various cloud technologies, but pretty much I just want to demonstrate to you or to show you a quick list. And I'm also going to be placing this in my description for this video, as well as you can actually download this as your checklist, right? I want this to be your guideline, right? So whether, for example, you are an administrator, Azure administrator, or Azure architect, then I believe that this checklist can be quite useful for you in terms of being on top of your game, in terms of executing your duties efficiently, right? So I may not be going into the details, right? This is just an high-level view of all the things that you can do, or to have this checklist to guide you in your operations, all right? So as I said before, things I do to monitor and make my Azure environment and deployments efficient and secure, right? So this is pretty much targeted towards your Azure cloud environment if you are working as a Azure administrator, right? So the list provided outlines the questions that I may ask while designing a solution or while administering an Azure environment, right? This is not the most extensive list, right? Other persons have different views, other opinions, right? How they go about carrying out their duties, right? So it all varies depending on the solution, your environment, right? Now, the thing is, the pros and the cons are best practices and deployment instructions, right, for different scenarios can be found on Microsoft's well-documented website. So everything that I'll be mentioning here, you can actually find the white papers. You can find all the documentations, all the instructions, all the demos, right? That can be used to implement these things, right? So that's one of the things about being a system admin or just overall IT professional, doing research to ensure that you're on the right path, right? So one of the things I normally ask is, for example, you're working in Azure. Are we just focusing on Azure administration right now? Or if you're an Azure architect, right? How can I get a single pane of glass view and management of servers running both in cloud and on-premise, right? And the question to that, the answer is deploy and use Windows Admin Center, right? And this is a very powerful tool that I have on my screen right now, that I can just quickly show that to you. This is a tool that you can quickly download, install on your computer, and you have a quick management or an overview of your environment, right? So this will actually allow you to manage both your servers on-premise as well as servers in the Azure cloud environment, right? And pretty much you can do a number of administrative tasks on all of the resources that sit within that environment. All right. How can I have a comprehensive security management of both my on-premise and Azure resources? Right. Simply, all you have to do is just deploy your Azure Security Center, and you're good to go. Right. Thirdly, is data on my storage. For example, your server address secure, right? You need to ensure that you are applying your drive encryption, right? For example, you need added security. All you need to do is what? Deploy Azure Advanced Threat Protection. You want to manage access to your subscriptions and all other resources in your Azure organization. You simply deploy role-based access control to all your resources, right? And you can go through this listing to say, check. Am I doing all these things? Am I carrying out all these basic things to ensure security functionality within the organization, right? Amongst all the other things that I need to do, you always have this baseline to guide you as a Azure administrator, right? And I actually compile this based on my experience, which I found very efficient, that I believe can also be a guideline for you as well, right? What about manage governance via Azure policy, right? So policy set the rules that you want to happen and want to prevent from happening in Azure, right? For example, forcing tagging of resources, right? That is where governance comes in, right? And you can deploy your Azure policies for that. What about properly organizing resources into resource groups, right? And then you can also protect those by applying resource locks. So you can check for those things to ensure that, or to prevent accidental deletion of or removal of those resources, right? So you go through and you check for that as well. So when you're creating, for example, VNets, right? You want to have virtual networks. You want to ensure that you're using your own virtual networks. Create your own virtual network instead of working with the defaults, right? Plan and deploy membership types, right? So carefully go through, look at to see are my membership types within my Azure infrastructure fully designed, right? Trying to look at whether or not your membership types are fully designed within your environment, right? And as I said before, I will not be going through the actual demonstration how we go about doing all of these things, right? Once you simply go in how to apply resource locks in Azure, you look on the Microsoft website, all the details are there, right? All listed, right? And it is even more better explained than I could do in this video at this point in time, right? So the next thing on my agenda is I normally say, all right, how can I control policy and governance within my Azure environment, right? You want to deploy your management groups, right? And the instructions are there. How can I monitor what is happening among the resources in my Azure network, right? Simply deploy your Azure monitoring, and this can be where you deploy your metrics to keep track of resource usages. For example, CPU utilization on your servers, spot bottlenecks, spikes, among a number of other metrics, right? You want to deploy your diagnostic logs, right? You want to deploy things like log analytics workspace, right? You want to utilize your Azure for assisting in monitoring 4 aspects of Azure, right? You want to be monitoring things like high availability, security, performance, and cost, which is very important. You want to configure and deploy alerts using triggers, right? You want to ensure that you have this quota management being deployed to control all users within your, for example, within departments, utilize this space, CPUs that are deployed to virtual machines, right? How can I access my servers remotely and securely, right? Very important is to deploy your bastion host, right? It's pretty much actually a DMZ. It's a good defense, right? So rather than VPN, having users VPN directly into servers, right? You actually connect to your bastion host, and then from your bastion host into your network, right? This is how you want to go about remote connection into your network, or VPN into your Azure environment, right? So in cases where you want to have fast and more reliable connection to files stored on Azure file servers, you want to deploy your Azure File Sync, right? So Azure File Sync creates an offline cache which aids in the synchronization process of your files. How can I manage my Azure files without having to log into Azure Web Portal or using Azure PowerShell, right? Simply install and use your Azure File Explorer, right? So it's pretty much Azure File Explorer, right? So Azure File Explorer, this is what it actually looks like from a quick view. Right, just waiting for that to pop up. Right, so with Azure File Explorer, then you are able to connect to all your storage, whether blob queues that exist, that you can actually carry out your manipulation, transfer files, download files, upload files, create access, all of those things, keys, right? How can I protect or limit access to Azure files, right? You want to ensure to protect access to files using your Azure storage firewall, right? Create service endpoints that can also be used to secure accounts from outside, right? Manage access keys by using your Azure Key Vault, right? So all these items that I place in the descriptions, as I said before, all the documentation. This is just a guideline, a checkpoint, a baseline that you can use to ensure that while architecting your Azure environment, while administering your Azure environment, you want to ensure that you have these basic things in place among the many of other suite of our services that can be deployed. And this also varies depending on your environment as well. Right, you want to deploy content delivery network where necessary to create a more fast and efficient access to frequently requested web files. Right, you want to configure and deploy your Azure file and folder backup. Right, using your Azure Recovery Service Vault, which can be used to to back up files and folders on both on-premise and your Azure resources. Also a very cool feature, very cool documentation of Microsoft, right? And this is more so for purposes on the architects inside, is that once you are planning to, or you're designing a solution for an organization, then Microsoft has a well-documented section that gives you guidelines about the best practices, how you go about designing for retail, finance, healthcare, right? All those organizations can be found here. They actually have diagrams, the best practices, how you go about the services that can be deployed, right? So these are guidelines for you as well that you can have in your checklist, right? Considerations for deploying and managing virtual machines, right? This is a must. This is one of the key things within the Azure environment. Deploying virtual machines, your servers. That is what runs the applications, right? You want to go to your pre-flight considerations, right? Your network, your subnet, so you go about breaking out your subnets, naming conventions, right? Ensuring that you're using meaningful names for governance, right? When you come down to your regions, availability, and pricing, you want to ensure that you have all your resources organized in their various regions, depending on where your offices are located, organizations are located, and how they need to be connecting to these resources, right? Your virtual machine families, depending on the workload and the applications that are being pushed from these servers, then you decide whether it's going to be a general purpose, compute optimized, memory optimized, storage optimized, GPU optimized, high performance compute, right? In deploying even your virtual machines, right? A lot of times you can deploy what is known as virtual machine extensions where necessary, right? So extensions can perform post-deployment configurations, right? So extensions are pretty much like third-party applications that you can embed into these virtual machines at the point of deploying them. So after you roll out your application, you don't have to go through that process of downloading and configuring. These are actually pre-built into your virtual machines that can be quickly deployed in your organization, saving you time and money as well, right? So to minimize downtime, ensure to carefully select the most fitting availability zones, availability sets for deploying your resources, right? Do have the required pool of VMs to handle workloads, right? You need to ask your question, do I have the required pool of VMs to handle workloads, right? And in order to deal with that situation, simple, you go to your scale sets and you create availability, place your VMs in scale sets, so they scale down and scale up according to workloads, right? Is there another question? These are, and I said before, these are just questions, these are just my checklists, right, that I use on a daily basis within my environment, right? Is the load across virtual machines in a scale set efficiently distributed, right? And I simply use my Azure load balancers to handle those situations, right? Are my servers applications delivering the services required in different regions, right? And right, simply to deal with that situation, you go to your traffic manager. All right, so checklist number 27. What do I have in place for disaster recovery and business continuity? Right, it doesn't make any sense for you to put time into creating a great Azure environment, configuring all of your servers and all of these resources, right? And it is not protected against disaster recovery, right? Azure has that services, right? All you need to do is to deploy your Azure Site Recovery Service using the Azure Recovery Services Vault, right? This pretty much involves a lot of server replication, and this can be used for both premise and on-premise, right? A hybrid situation, right? So Having checklist number 28, having created a fully functional Azure network, how can I make a copy of this for backup and future deployment? Right, this is very critical. Anything can happen within an environment that can mess up your configurations. You need to have a quick copy. Right, all you need to do is to create or use your Azure templates. So for your resource group, all the deployments within the resource group, a JSON file, right, can be copied. You can actually download a template of the environment that you can save. You can back that up, keep it somewhere safe. So in the case of emergency, you need to roll back, you need to quickly deploy this in another organization somewhere, for maybe within that same company. Right, you can quickly bring this template to the Azure platform and you upload your template. Right, and the instructions are there to quickly carry out that process in this link that I provide in the file in my description. Right, checklist point number 29. How can I get or see a topology view of my network? Right, this is very important, being able to see, have a pictorial view of what's happening in your Azure environment. Right, all you have to do is just configure and deploy your Azure Network Watcher. Right, as I said before, all the steps, procedures are there. Right, from Microsoft website. Right, so this is just a guide. As I said before, one of the things about being a system admin in order to work efficiently is to have a set of tools, know where to find your tools, when to find them, how to use your tools and your resources very quickly. Right, that's one of the things of being a system administrator. Right, checklist number 30. How do I check for performance between various points in my Azure network infrastructure? Right, you quickly deploy your Azure Network Performance Monitor, right, along with other tools such as on IP flow verify. This is simple, like a ping between servers to see things like latency or whether a connection or communication is actually taking place. Right, you have your on next up to see the various apps that the traffic is actually traversing from one point to the next, right, and whether or not that is consistent to what you want to achieve. Check this point number 31. You want to how can I synchronize my on-premise AD services with Azure Active Directory? All you have to do is to deploy your Azure AD Connect, and all of that will be taken care of. Right. Checklist number 32 is question you want to ask yourself again: is the traditional password access to Azure admin account sufficient? Right. You want to protect this root account as best as possible, right? And this is where you can deploy your Azure multi-factor authentication, MFA, right? Now, very importantly is that you do proper research, right? Have a backup game plan if anything breaks during doc implementation, right? Have the requisite approvals and justifications prior to implementing any of the above or not listed items that can or could result in any downtime or major changes to the organization's productivity or compliance. Right, that's very important. So you read, you go through documentations, go through your checklist, best practices, right? And then have your test environment. You can always create a copy. As I said before, create a template in a different subscription. Test your deployments before actually pushing them to your production environment, which is always a best practice. Right? And this is how you could go about creating your checklist. So main task, status, right? Deployed or to be deployed, description of the deployment, right? Main account protected, and you place what needs to be done, and the date of deployment. And you could also modify this to add other things, right? Why actually deploy such service, the purpose of it, right? Main task, and then this could be used for your own tracking purposes. It is always good as a system administrator, security professional, always to have good documentation so that you can always refer to this, especially in cases where there are emergencies or downtimes, right? So this is what your Azure File Explorer looks like. You normally go to connect your account, and then you'll be able to see all your drives and stuff that are listed in your Azure account. All right. So guys, I do hope that you find this very helpful, very informative, and of course, subscribe, share the link, and you could also share your feedback of some of the things that you do within your Azure environment, or even just as a system admin, that I could also add to my checklist in carrying out my duties efficiently as well. All right, so subscribe to my channel. I would really appreciate that, so you could also get updates on all other videos in my channel.